Well, because yet again, I clearly have no sense of self-control when I'm doing this late at night again. Hello, everybody. Time for yet another Warhammer 40k reaction. This time we're delving into some actual lore based off of a recommendation from a comment on one of the videos of me reacting to Bricky's stuff. We're going to be reacting to Luetin's videos, part 1, at least, about the Octarius War. Because I want to find out what the fuck this shit was, and because there's plenty of Warhammer 40k lore videos from him to go around to just talk about all kinds of topics, really. So I'm curious what this war is, because apparently it's about what happens when Tyranids show up, and every time Tyranids show up, I just know bad things happen. So yeah, let's get on with that. Okay, good. Also, as we get started here, one can clearly see I have finally decided to grow up and be a big VTuber and actually zoom in on the model that I'm using because Apex Legends did a thing, and I have decided I'm just going to use this one because I'm too broke to commission my own, unfortunately. Oh boy. Anyway, let's get started with this lore video about frickin' the Octarius world, and let's see what the hell happens here.
Today's video is brought to you by Audible. Audible provides a great value way to access audiobooks for its members and is one of the best ways to make huge savings on Warhammer audiobooks, which is why I personally use and recommend it. Whether you're painting miniatures or doing other daily tasks during the holiday season, Audible provides a great way to optimize your 40k shortlist. As an Audible Premium member, you receive 1 credit every month for use on any title, and the best way to get value from Audible is in using your credits on those premium audiobooks, often over 10 hours in length. For shorter narratives like First Lord of the Imperium, you may want to consider purchasing this through Audible, because premium members also get a 30% discount on audiobooks, and it's my preferred option for those shorter stories. A great many of you in my audience are already using Audible, but if you're yet to trial it, you can start today and get full access to thousands of audiobooks, originals and podcasts, additionally included in the Plus catalogue. But even better though, right now for a limited time, you'll save 46% on your first 4 months of Audible. It's an ideal season to get listening and learn more by going to audible.com/Luetin, or for those in the US, text Luetin to 500 500. Details on the trilogy selection, which runs to the end of this year, follow at the end of the video.
Okay, just to say it, just because, again, watching ads, so that way these guys get their revenue and whatever. There are so many Warhammer 40k books. Like, I've seen them when I'm, like, browsing Barnes & Noble and stuff, and I'm just like, I know the lore runs deep, but holy shit. Like, I'm wondering, I forget, like, how many books are in the Horus Heresy? Like, I know it's, like, what, over 20 or something just on the Horus Heresy? Which is madness, mostly because, I mean, they need to cover the Primarchs and all this other stuff. And then there's just whatever the hell they come up with and decide to get these authors to write within the universe itself. Oh, geez. I've heard some of them are pretty good. I've watched a couple book clubs from Adeptus Ridiculous, like God's Ghost, and a couple of the books on the Necrons, which are supposedly pretty good. I don't use Audible. I like to own books said by men who really needs to get a shelf, because I own too many light novels and manga, and I just don't have a shelf for them. The book I just slapped was Volume 1 of Overlord. I really should sit down and read this through. I have a bookmark in it. It's been so long since I last read it, I just forgot where I was. Anyway, on with the Lord. Just a little tidbit. Ah, yes, the good old tagline. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. We can live neither with nor without hope. It spurs us on when nothing else will. Yet should we wish for failed to materialize, it can crush our spirits more than any enemy could. Unknown. Part 1. Okay, let's go. Let's sit back and listen and see some good ass art. Liking this intro. I'm liking this intro with the music and the art. It's a good mood. It's a good mood. Good vibe, good vibe.
As the horror of Inquisitor Cryptman's scheme came further to light, we have begun to finally learn the details of just how the Imperium has decided to deal with the crisis which threatens to unleash either a Tyranid assault far worse than the original tendrils of Leviathan, or an Orc war, the likes of which has never been seen.
Yeah, it's just not a good mix.
Acceptable to the Imperium, and so it now seeks to contain the crisis. Unable to resolve the situation, it is accepted that containment for now is one of its best options, and so they have sought to form a containment circle around the sector of Octarius itself, using the vast resources of the Imperium to do so. After the ousting of Inquisitor Cryptman, the new member of the Inquisition primarily handling the situation of Octarius is known as Nasir Sahansan. To no surprise, an outspoken member of the Ordo Xenos, highly critical of Inquisitor Cryptman. It's often questioned also how ordinary humans who are non-Astartes are able to cope with the challenge of dealing with conflicts that are of the scale of Octarius in terms of pure lifespan. How is it that Inquisitors are able to travel the galaxy and learn enough to be able to deal with the problems facing the Imperium?
I want to say again, I'm hoping that I learn a bit about what the hell Cryptman did to have the Imperium decide to boot him. Because this is the Imperium we're talking about. What do you have to do to make them say, nah, you gotta fucking go? Jeez.
Especially when your average human life, even in the age of the Imperium, is only going to be something like a standard century, perhaps a little beyond. So how is it that Inquisitors and the like are capable of handling grinding conflicts that span centuries, perhaps even
insanity?
Well, for one thing, officials within powerful factions such as the Ecclesiarchy, Inquisition Administratum, and very obviously the Mechanicus have rejuvenation treatments or span extending technology available to them that are not available
that makes sense.
to your standard Imperial governors and other sundry officials.
Yeah, that tracks.
For the most part, there's always backdoor methods by which people can access this and pay for it. Then of course you also have other methods like bionic augmentation, thus enabling them to engage and manage assignments that would ordinarily only have been perhaps in the initial stages of operation before they themselves expired from the ravages of time. Inquisitor Sahansan is one such individual. Despite their reputation for vocally calling out Inquisitor Cryptman, who we recall, despite his extreme methods, continues by many to be attributed with saving the Imperium, albeit using something akin to a scorched galaxy methodology, wielding the power of Exterminatus as readily as a guardsman might throw frag grenades. Inquisitor Nasir was equally capable and had achieved many great successes.
See, that was the main bit that I knew about Cryptman from memes, was that this guy was like, Exterminatus is not a last resort, it's basically just the go-to solution when something goes wrong. That's the meme anyway that I know about Cryptman, that it's like, oh yeah, no, he uses Exterminatus like a guardsman uses grenades. That says a lot. Oh, jeez.
Even within his early years of serving the Inquisition, his proactive and aggressive methods, though, would leave him severely wounded, and as such only able in later life to study warfare strategy, of course specifically related to the extermination of Xenos threats to the Imperium. This, in combination with the respect built in his formative years, that would enable him the associations and connections necessary to formulate a grand strategy in dealing with the Octarius sector. He would reach out to leading admirals of the Imperial Navy, even Astartes captains, to petition his so-called cordon impenetra, the circle of Imperial might surrounding now Octarius, so that if it could not be cleansed, it might at least be contained. His plan was not without considerable criticism from within the Imperium. Many officials claimed his plan was in fact on par with Inquisitor Cryptman, for while this suggested impenetrable barrier surrounding Octarius would protect all of those in the wider Imperium, Nasir's cordon also condemned all worlds within subsectors inside of the Octarius sector to be doomed to weather the insatiable alien festival of slaughter alone.
Well, I mean, let's see here. If you're deciding you're just going to contain both a massive orc wah and a Tyranid infestation, if the only thing you can do is contain it, then yeah, you're basically just resigning how many planets to just be completely fucking closed off and have to deal with it as you have this giant containment unit circle made up of freaking the Inquisition and Space Marines. Good fucking god. The fact that kind of stuff is normal in 40k is just mind-bogglingly insane.
And while it were true that the majority of the Octarius sector had already been controlled by the Orcs, there remained many Imperial worlds within subsectors on the borders that would now be abandoned to their inevitably grisly fates. Essentially, the calculation that Nasir had made was to write off all worlds either in the process of being assaulted by Xenos or that would soon surely fall, thereby minimizing wastage of resources that would be ploughed into worlds already considered lost. Unfortunately, it was accurate to make the comparison with Inquisitor Cryptman that in doing so, an effort would be made to evacuate the worlds within the systems of these subsectors. Perhaps most
that tracks.
Though,
that
while
tracks.
these civilian populations were not to be evacuated, military forces and hardware, key personnel, treasured artifacts and Imperial records were all ordered to be extracted from these worlds, leaving behind only the vulnerable human population.
Because, that's just how the Imperium does. Leave behind the civilians and let them get frickin' turned into gene stealer cults. Frickin', it's a good thing I have Game Pass, because I'm actually downloading Darktide right now, so I might play that tomorrow. As of me recording this. I'll probably have played it before, I don't know. I might end up streaming it before I post this video, so that this comment will be completely stupid if I do. God damn it, this is what I get.
Some officials, of course, would bribe or escape having caught a sense of what was occurring. Meanwhile, the remaining worlds in systems on the edge of the Imperial cordon in Penetra would be redesignated as Warden planets, not dissimilarly to the status of the fabled world of Cadia. They would act now just as Cadia had done before its fall, by becoming heavily fortified and maintaining continual patrols and raids to surgically strike and deal damage to
Sounds for Cadia
amid their endless war of attrition, to prevent whichever side was becoming more dominant from securing too strong of a foothold to potentially overcome their entangled enemy or break out from the Octarius sector itself. Breakouts specifically were difficult to prevent and even detect. When attempting to control an area of space as vast as the Octarius sector and all subsectors and systems within, communication issues being as fragmented as they are within the Imperium, coupled with the Tyrannid's shadow in the warp blanketing large areas of space, has made detection incredibly challenging. In fact, one horrifying positive in allowing many remaining Imperial worlds within the cordon to remain is that it has to some degree allowed the ability to monitor where and when Xenos are pushing to break out. The transition...
Because, I guess that's a silver lining. Oh boy. Hey, as twisted as it is, now we can keep track of them. Kind of. We may have consigned potentially trillions of civilians to their horrifying deaths at the hands of orcs or consumption by Tyranids, but hey, at least now we can keep an eye on them. Huh? Oh, Jesus fucking Christ, 40k.
For many of these newly designated Warden planets often came at significant cost to the beauty and cultural heritage of said planet.
That's an understatement.
The report exclaimed how its natural wonders and places of renowned beauty had been destroyed, now used for quarrying of raw materials to build heavy fortifications. Other areas turned to intensive industrialization for warfare, and populations who were formerly skilled in the arts and glorification and worship of the Emperor of Man now were being retrained as frontline infantry. Some hive worlds have even resisted the mass mobilization of its citizenry, and attempts to fulfill recruitment quotas have left hive cities facing massive population riots that were barely able to be contained by enforcement. Also notably, rogue traders have been able to leverage individuals' desires to escape the horror in exchange for lucrative profits, acting under the guise of delivering official material to destinations outside of the cordon. With the scale of operations being deployed, individual rogue traders with questionable morals are easily able to slip in and out of subsectors.
Okay, to bring it up, I don't know a whole lot about rogue traders by comparison to the lore for 40k that I do know and understand. The most I know about rogue traders is just kind of the thing, like how they were sort of the original tabletop game for 40k, when the setting was just being developed and all of that. And, like anything in 40k, obviously it's freaking dark as hell. I also know they're making that new Rogue Trader game soon. I know a couple people on Discord who pre-ordered it. I don't know a whole lot about them, though. I'm definitely going to need to watch videos about Rogue Traders, because they also have my interest. So, I think this segment... Yeah, no, I think this segment's just about, all the freaking harsh realities of what the Octarius War is like, going by this title. Harsh realities.
The strategy of Inquisitor Nasir has left many citizens of Warden planets openly questioning the fact that in order to save their world, they had also now destroyed what made it worthwhile saving in the first place.
Yeah, that's 40k for you. That's basically 40k in a nutshell. we're trying to save it, but we've also maybe kind of sort of accidentally ruined the reason we were trying to save it to begin with. Ooh, whoops. Whoopsie-daisy. Anyway. The first deluge.
Despite their best laid plans, it was clear from the outset that the struggle within the cordon surrounding Octarius was going to be challenging. Inquisitor Sahnson was not a singular unchallenged voice in how to tackle the spiraling Octarius crisis, and even though he had managed to bring together a formidable and impressive...
Hold up. I'm just looking at this art. I'm like, what is this Death Star looking thing? Like, I know it's obviously 40k, you can tell by the ships, but I'm still like, I just see that disc part, and I'm just like, I see the trench, I'm like, what is this Death Star looking thing right here?
Impressive plan that now surrounded the Empire of Octarius and its surrounding subsectors, it was becoming painfully clear just how thin their defences were stretched. Building up defensive worlds against the scale of Xenos threat they were facing does not happen overnight, and many high-ranking officials of the Imperium were already debating and discussing that the Xenos forces were expanding at such exponential rates that they may in fact be uncontainable.
Oh, jeez, I wonder why.
Began against Sahanson's vision of an impenetrable sphere of defense surrounding Octarius. Other Inquisitors and Imperial military leaders suggested that an immense and decisive strike should be used to shatter the momentum and weight of Xenos forces before such options were no longer even possible. Essentially, a classic best defense is a good offense scenario, although considering the entire reason as to why Inquisitor Kryptman decided it were necessary to redirect the Tyranid fleet of Leviathan toward Octarius in the first place was that they were unable to be resisted by the Imperium. It seems that the suggestion that now suddenly they could throw enough human fodder at them as to make a dent at all seems somewhat illogical, not to mention the fact that the Tyranids were now being fueled by the Orcs, and the Orcs were reveling and hyped up by the unending battles, slaughtering these tsunamis of horrifying bugs.
Yeah, that's kind of a bad situation to be in. You're basically caught between two problems. You have the Tyranids who, completely use biomass from the people they slaughtered to go, and then you have Orcs who would love to fight those things. Now, I think someone mentioned it in the comments, too. Someone mentioned it in the comments on another video, that Tyranids can't actually consume Orcs because Orcs are fungi, so their spores aren't usable biomass. So, Orcs and Tyranids are like just the epitome of unstoppable force meets a movable object. Which I think is, it's still horrifying. It's not quite like from that fan fiction that I mentioned where they basically merged and became this thing called the Great Devourer. But it's still a horrifying idea just to know that there is this sector where they just have Tyranids and Orcs just endlessly fighting each other. Which is fucking scary.
So the prospect of throwing hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Imperial Guard against such a wall of attrition seemed a forlorn hope.
Yeah, no, that's gonna suck.
That further threatened to undermine the greater vision suggested by Nasir. Only compounding the issue was the heel-dragging speed of the Imperial deployment to warden worlds on the edge of the cordon. In the opening years of the plan to create an impenetrable cordon surrounding Octarius, many warden planets' capabilities were deemed to be well below levels determined necessary to withstand a major assault by either of the Xenos.
Yeah, that's not fucking surprising.
In fact, it was generally determined to be less than half of what was required. They were far from even the minimal levels considered acceptable.
Oh, no.
Not if, but when the designated cordon would be tested, and when that first test came, it was far more devastating than any could have anticipated.
Of course.
The affected area was in the subsector of Pancalis, where with little to no warning, many of its systems were suddenly deluged by Xenos hordes.
Oh shit.
The level of defences of the planets within the subsector were widely ranging, with some having been moderately well fortified, others had barely anything to defend themselves with. Pancalis became almost overnight a crucible of intense warfare. Tyranid, Orcs, Genestealer cults, chaos breaches occurring, and within the disruption, deployed Imperials such as Inquisition, Deathwatch, Astartes chapters, Mechanicus forces bringing with them Night Houses and Titanicus legios. Pancalis was burning white hot with the fires of war, and to rub salt into the wound.
Shit.
Reports came of Drakari raiding and emptying cities
no.
while the eyes of the Imperium's defences were elsewhere.
Oh no, talk about going from bad to worse. That is such a dick move. But exactly the kind of thing I expect from the Drakari, let's be totally honest. That is absolutely their thing.
Despite the volume of forces being directed toward the subsector by the Imperium, worlds were already falling. The
Of course.
system being one of the first threatened by major Orc forces under the leadership of one Nabrot Stubfingers, who incidentally, if I ever make an Orc force, needs to definitely be one of my characters, as the name Stubfingers is just too comical.
Yeah, that is. I fucking love Orc names, man. It's just, they have those fun names where they're more descriptive of the character, so you get somewhere it's just really funny like that.
These Orcs were of the Bloodaxes clan, an intriguing Orc faction, as they curiously sometimes have been known to fight not against but with the Imperium when situations merited, even having traded with the Imperium.
Hold up. I'm gonna have to look into these guys. Orcs that just fight with the Imperium if the whim strikes them. Well, if it fucking works, it fucking works.
They also use more stealthy practices than most other Orcs, and they take the effort to consider the bare bones of what might be called strategies. They will even retreat from battle if they consider the situation to be unsuitable. And while many Orcs may eventually run from battle if the tides turn heavily against them to come back later for another go, the Bloodaxes are more likely to do so with a true sense of awareness as to when it may be tactically advantageous. With their unusual behaviour, it's no wonder other Orcs tend to look upon them as stupid and not particularly orky.
I mean, knowing what I know about 40k Orcs, that makes a lot of sense. They wouldn't be orky, as Luetin said, because they actually use tactics and they don't just rush headlong into battle and waste forces. That's Orcs that actually use tactics and try to get along with other people. My. Fucking horrible. Ya gets ain't good orcs is what ya are. I can't do a good Cockney accent.
Most of all, they're seen as untrustworthy, given their past interactions with the Umis. Still, regardless of any variations that may have occurred, none of this was taking place in the Kernak system, and Stubfingers quickly bested the Imperium by fooling them into thinking captured ships were still under the Imperium's control, thereby using them as weapons, crashing the ships into defensive mechanisms.
Okay, just to show the contrast, I love the contrast in these two images of the Orc ship versus the Imperium ship. Look at the Imperium ship. It is clean. It is well ordered. It is, I mean, yeah, it has giant guns and spires, but look at it. It's nice. It's orderly. And then look at the mess that is the Orc ship. It looks rickety, bolted together. Everything is kind of slapdash and hazardly there. The rear engine is like dozens of who knows what rocket boosters slapped together. I love it. I love Orc vehicles just because of the fact they look legitimately slapped together, and it's great. I love that kind of aesthetic. Also, keep in mind, the red ones go faster. That was not a Cockney accent. The red ones go faster. Yeah, no, I can't do a Cockney accent. I can do it on certain phrases, but I can't do it in general. God fucking damn it.
Mechanica stations, to the glee and humour of the Orcs, who thought the entire situation was hilarious. This was, of course done by Stubfinger's major armada of ships, which lay waste to Kernak 3 and 4. This initial testing of the cordon, well before it was truly ready, led to night houses being annihilated, heavily defended penal worlds also were overwhelmed as a deluge of Orcs assaulted, numbering in what was estimated to be billions. Despite even Titanic being present, this steady attrition of Imperial hardware as it's turned against them meant that it was only a matter of time before a tipping point came and the Imperials were no longer able to mount any kind of defense. The weight of Orc firepower outmatched Imperial production capability, and millions were left to die amid hasty evacuations. With the slim hope of escaping to elsewhere in the system, they may try to mount a counter-offensive.
I mean, as it goes, Orcs believe in more DACA. And there is never enough DACA. There will never be enough. I wonder how an Orc would feel if you told him about the Big Bang and the fact it's still technically going on. I wonder if that's already been covered, actually. Who knows, someone might say it in the comments, we'll see about that. But, I mean, still... God, they even bred out the frickin' penal world colonies just to bolster the forces that they could. Jesus Christ.
Elsewhere within the Pancalis subsector, there were Tyranid incursions, often upon worlds already struggling to contend with Genestealer cultist uprisings, and now having perfectly executed their design as agents of disorder, the all-enveloping shadow of the Hive Fleet would arrive to scour planets prepared by
that sounds
insidious
right as
cultists
well.
who found themselves twisted into believing their true masters were these horrifying Xenos.
Yeah.
I've already discussed at length the process by which planets are undermined by Genestealer cults, as
I'll
well
need to
as
watch that
the
video.
miserable conclusion planets infected by these types of Xenos agents can expect. So see Tyranids Part 2 for more on that, which follows linked at the end of this video.
I'll probably have to watch that another point if I just keep going down this hole of educating myself about Warhammer lore.
Suffice to say, worlds within the subsector, now swamped by swaths of Tyranid, were now hopelessly lost. In predictable fashion, the Xenos horrors would descend first via their blanket of warp disturbance blocking all communications, then a systematic invasion from orbit using bioforms dropped from the skies. All attempts at defense by this stage for any world other than heavily defended Imperial Bastion planets like an Astartes chapter homeworld or Forge world are going to be token gestures.
God, look at that art though. That is metal as hell. The freaking Swarm Lord, the other incursions, you have the Orcs. That is just, ooh, it is lovely, lovely carnage. It is fantastic.
Best. So inevitably, for the worlds of systems in the sector, they would be steadily consumed. Gigantic tunneling horrors, large enough
What is this cartoony version of it?
Rampage through the surface of planets, eating rock and organic matter alike. While elsewhere population centers were subjected to almost endless bioform bombardment, bioexplosive mine...
Oh, wait. No, fuck. I tried to change an expression, and I forgot that it does shit like that. Where was I? Wanted to hit my shocked expression, I'm like, oh god. We're like right here.
Were subjected to almost endless bioform bombardment, bioexplosive mines, or others that burst forth ravenous acid-spitting creatures, all amid air now heavily saturated with Tyranid spores. Some Imperial fortresses managed to hold for a time as the organic forms broke upon their thick ferrocrete walls like an ocean upon mighty rocks. Yet the Tyranids are no stranger to such bastions, and when all other resources fail, they will utilize their immensely powerful psychic forms, such as the Zoanthrope and Neurothrope, to literally crumble reality and implode void shields surrounding Imperial fortresses. Upon the worlds they fell upon, this is precisely what occurred. And this is one of the factors making the Tyranid Xenos so truly terrifying to the forces of humanity, is that whoever they descend upon, all those who lie beneath the skies looking up as they fill with spores and bioform deployment mechanisms, know that at the back of their minds, as much as they might attempt to maintain that spark of human driving force, that desire to survive, their hope in survival, the gnawing voice in the back of their mind will remind them that even their best efforts will likely prove to be futile. Few, if any, worlds are capable of surviving a Tyranid deluge, least of all those cut off from any and all external support.
Yeah, that's see, that's again one of the main things I know about Tyranids is them basically being just the worst thing, one of if not the worst things, aside from maybe a chaos intervention of some kind. Tyranids have got to be one of the worst, just because of that pure factor of basically being these living perpetual motion machines that, as long as they get biomass, you're just kind of fucked. Which makes things very crazy and horrifying. I think it's like, let's see here, I know the thing of the Space Hulk game, which I played a bit of because it was free on PS Plus like a couple years ago, is just the whole thing of like, oh yeah, no, sometimes the only way to deal with Tyranids is just blow it up. Because that is the only solution if it goes so far. Pyrrhic success.
There do
Catachan!
of course, those rare instances where combinations of gritted bloody teeth, initiative and tactical prowess allow humanity to drag themselves through the inevitable horror to the rare success of victory on the other side.
Don't underestimate the human spirit.
How a system of low-populated, strictly devout Imperials were able to weather the storm of the Xenos. Yet within the system of Bianzia's Hollow, this is precisely what occurred. Just how is another matter entirely. Because despite their skill,
you got my interest.
The enemy, one might wonder if their religious devotion played a part in their ability to evade total destruction, which
Maybe.
on the face of things had seemed inevitable, as it would be across countless worlds assaulted by Xenos. Did the Emperor reach out here and single out these worlds for his protection, especially considering the relative tactical significance of the system? The defenders of the few planets without the system would undoubtedly tell you yes, for they lived in harsh conditions with minimal means to defend themselves. Upon the mining world of
that would convince you.
The populations largely retreated underground to the vast network of tunnels and mining operations, using explosives to cave in around baited Tyranid swarms, which sometimes stopped them, or other times the Xenos simply skirted around and assaulted from new directions.
Yeah, that'd do it.
The defenders. This process of painfully intensive attrition ground on for many months. On another of the system's worlds named Holy Toil, they similarly would use the skills and land they knew to crush the Xenos, baiting and triggering vast landslides to crush their enemy, using the landscape to their advantage.
Well, you gotta do what you gotta do. If it works, I say.
Carefully planned kill zones and environmental traps were enough to hold back the Tyranid menace, but they were relentless.
Smart stuff. Good moves.
It was only with the aid of Astartes' Deathwatch in combination with the expert knowledge of the limited population, the peoples of Bindze's Hollow were able to turn the tide, and only through the combination of bitter determination to survive no matter the cost and precise scheme tactics delivered maximum damage using minimal firepower. Plus, the combined aid and knowledge of specialist Astartes trained to exterminate such Xenos would allow the human workers of these small worlds to emerge as the victors.
See, okay, pausing here because I do want to bring it up. The Deathwatch Marines, they're a faction. They're one of the sub-factions I watched some stuff on beforehand because I think they're one of my favorite factions of Space Marines. For those who don't know, the Deathwatch are basically like these specialist Space Marines. I think they're technically part of the Ordo Xenos. They're kind of overseen by them last I checked. And their Space Marines were taken from all sorts of different chapters and put together into these kill teams. So, like, you can get Space Marines from the Ultramarines, the Salamanders, the frickin' the Space Wolves, the Dark Angels, what have you. And you get these unique squads of Space Marines, and that, as you can see in the image, really cool armor where it's like they have this jet black body, but then like the left arm is this silver thing where they have like this engraving on it, and it's a really cool concept. I think, isn't there like a kill team game for Deathwatch too? I think there is. It's just, the Deathwatch are a really cool sub-faction for Space Marines, and I'm definitely gonna maybe watch one of these videos on them and talk about that, because learning about them is so cool. Space Marine factions are definitely cool. Just a lot of the sub stuff is really cool in general, honestly. It's just, but Space Marines, I mean, look, I can be a basic bitch all I want. Space Marines are cool, okay? I like how they have all the sub factions. I'm definitely gonna have to maybe watch Bricky's video about the Black Templars, because I also like them too. They're a special brand of meme-worthy nuts, and yet somehow they are Dorn's sons. It is... They're Imperial Fist successors. It is amazing that Imperial Fist successors are so mimetically insane.
It's impossible to say.
Not really insane, just
contaminated by alien
very righteous.
Can never be considered truly cleansed, as often they reappear decades, centuries, and even millennia down the line.
Sounds about right.
Held the line, and a small victory for the Imperium was still a victory, and enough to lift the spirits of many.
Take what you can get.
Where one system that seemed doomed from the outset survived despite everything being seemingly against it, elsewhere the strongest systems and planets struggled to keep their heads above water when they suffered truly catastrophic devastation, being assaulted both internally and externally simultaneously. This is what within the Kasolst Anvil system, a system featuring heavy defences, many industrial worlds producing armament, and hive worlds with populations so vast as to be near enough limitless. They considered themselves to be powerful enough to weather anything that the alien horrors could throw at them, yet soon enough...
Pride cometh before the fall.
As noted previously, the cults of the Tyranids are one of the most powerful weapons in their destabilization of Imperial planets, following them out from the inside, insidiously corrupting power from within, and enabling Tyranid assaults when they eventually arrive to sometimes occur with only the most minimal levels of resistance. Genestealer cults can seed themselves over generations, and changes occur so gradually that populations are barely able to notice it happening. Then, before they're able to prevent it, the entire leadership structures of worlds have been completely undermined, and when the most desperate of moments arrives on the horizon, strong leadership is nowhere to be found, and then the mass slaughter begins. This, though, was not their only problem. With such vast populations upon their hive worlds, and such massive levels of industry, these are the breeding grounds of the disaffected.
See, that is Like I said, pride cometh before the fall, but that is a terrible combination of things. Not only do you have the potential of gene stealer cults that take who knows how long to see themselves before the frickin' Hive Fleet arrives, you then have a bunch of disaffected workers who aren't satisfied with their conditions in the Hive world, and everything from there just gets worse and worse. And now suddenly you're having to weather invasions from either Tyranids or Orcs at whatever turn, because this sector is just fucked. Oh boy. Oh no.
The jealous, the power-hungry, and so the system of Kasol's Anvil found itself facing both cults worshipping the dark beings of the Warp, as well as those worshipping the Xenos.
Oh no, chaos is involved. Of course.
The timing could not have been worse, and what followed were the inevitable consequences. The Imperials had on their side the benefit of strong discipline among those troops who were not contaminated, and thankfully the leadership of the system worlds were also not significantly compromised, enabling the defenders to allow the Tyranid, Orcs and Cultists to largely fight among themselves, thus allowing the humans to generally pick their battles and only engage with weakened Xenos forces, or when it was necessary to constrain their advance. As successful as such disciplined strategies were, it still led to deaths in the millions, and this was despite immense support from the likes of super heavy Ultramar Auxiliae. Where ordinarily such massive firepower and heavy defences would have proved considerably formidable and would hold a better than average chance of withstanding a main Xenos assault, the disruption within was making things far more challenging for the Imperials. Sabotage, constant small-scale insurrections, these were headaches the leadership could well do without. And also, they had to ensure that forces were assigned to deal with such matters. This was a considerable frustration because these are forces that could have been used in fighting the far more pressing main assaults. Thankfully though, as the war raged, such small-scale cults were swept up by massive conscription or skillful eradication by
that would do it.
This enabled a more focused effort in defense by the Imperials. Still, wherever there were battles to be had, lines to be held, the cost was extortionate. The Imperium's forces were holding the line within the Pancala subsector, but barely. Inquisitor Sahanson was acutely aware that at this early stage, defeat here would doom the entire Cordon project before it had truly begun. In the eventuality of either the Orcs or Tyranids successfully breaking clean through the Imperial defensive line, this would then enable them to connect with new forces outside,
and the entire thing would just become a bust.
To secure biomass that would begin fielding a new campaign of destruction, devouring worlds even deeper into the Imperium. Either of these eventualities was considered wholly unacceptable and were to be prevented by any means necessary. However, something being deemed unacceptable by Imperial officials and being literally preventable were two entirely different things. The necessary forces to bolster an already below-strength cordon were not readily forthcoming in neighbouring sectors and systems. Additionally, many had already been stripped nearly bare of defences, and options were becoming increasingly limited for Inquisitor Sahanson. Consequently, the entire validity of the Cordon Impenetra operation was looking increasingly precarious.
Okay, now before it gets into this second to last segment, I want to, bring it up just because that is interesting. I like how the thing about this entire problem seems to come down to Imperial logistics, which the Imperium, and to their credit, often does a very good job of. We can thank Gilliman for that one, because that man knew what the fuck he was doing when it came to logistics. But it is, of course, interesting that that does seem to be the main issue for the Imperium when it comes to this conflict and trying to do their whole cordon thing with the Inquisitors. God, I forget it. Yeah. Sahas? I'll just call him Saha. It just does seem to be the logistics of the situation. I mean, for some reason, you have the weird twist of that one tiny subsector that's able to hold its own, seemingly by the grace of the Emperor, or blind to fucking luck, apparently. But then you have these bigger, more industrial worlds that should all, by all logical reason, have the logistical power and fortifications to hold out, and just having it bite them in the ass for a variety of reasons. I mean, shit, once Chaos Cults gets involved along with the Xenos invasion, at least there's a benefit that you can just kind of let them fight against each other. But, the logistics being a big factor in this is kind of interesting, too. And, I mean, like Luetin said there, something being preventable versus being deemed unacceptable by the Imperium are two different things and don't go hand in hand. It's like, okay, you may deem it unacceptable, but the problem is, can we even prevent it at all? If possible. This might not be an if, it might just be a when. It's not if they break through, it's when they break through, which is the case with a lot of things in 40k as it happens, really. It's usually never a question of if, only when. It's like, You never know when something is just going to go wrong and then everything is going to go up in flames and become a shitstorm. Opposing views. Alright, now the internal conflict begins.
Despite the Inquisition giving the impression of its full and united authority in the name of the Emperor, we know it of course to be anything but.
Of course, it's
Across
never.
the Imperium, many
Never
systems
is.
and sectors will likely know only the control of specific factions of the Inquisition, perhaps the Thorians or mono-dominant philosophies, for there are in fact a wide-ranging plethora of philosophical outlooks by those within the Inquisition, such as the Amalathians, who believe that the Emperor has an all-seeing grand plan, and that therefore whatever is currently occurring within humanity is unfolding exactly as it should. Or by contrast, it could be the extremely heretical followers of Xanthism, who believe in using and turning the powers of chaos against it, be these artifacts, weapons, or god machines that are possessed, demon hosts, and any other dark arcane methodology. Given the wide-reaching divide between inquisitorial ideologies, it's no surprise that there are those who might offer dissenting opinions on how to handle the situation within Octarius. In fact, the entire situation was starting to descend into a finger-pointing contest, with each accusing the others of being as much like Inquisitor Cryptman or worse.
Because of course the Imperium, the Inquisition is going to frickin' divide amongst itself and start playing the finger-pointing game about who's fucking up the worst. It's interesting to hear that there is an inquisitorial frickin' faction that actually considers the idea of using the powers of chaos without, letting themselves fall to chaos as potentially stupid an idea as that actually is. But I mean, I guess if it works for them, it'll work. But who knows if it does? I mean, maybe it works for them. Maybe.
As mentioned earlier, there are those who believe that Inquisitor Sahasan's grand operation to surround and seal in the Xenos within Octarius was doomed to failure and a completely wasted effort.
Probably.
Such Inquisitor being Athacles van Roth, who described Nasir as suffering from Cryptman madness. Except that he himself then posited that the only way to acceptably deal with the Octarius problem was by launching a campaign to neutralize the Xenos threat. Individuals other than myself might dare to suggest that there was an air of hypocrisy in such framing of other Inquisitors, but to themselves suggest far more insane solutions.
Yeah, geez, I wonder what that would be about.
Came in the form of a bizarre Xenos artifact, that being a strange crown of an orc boss, which seemingly disrupted the synaptic connections that are vital for Tyranid forms to function with any coherency, thereby making them unable to mount any solid resistance against Imperial forces.
That is actually cool. Okay. Again, because I know that orcs have this entire thing where basically they seem to have this innate psychic ability to affect reality around them. They're literally reality warpers who just make shit work because they believe it'll work. I wonder if this crown came about because this orc war boss had this idea that, because it definitely sounds like something that the orcs probably would have somehow created basically by accident. Huh. That's interesting. Something that can interrupt the synaptic connections in Tyranids, which is definitely a strategy, because since they're a pretty solid hive mind, you somehow interrupt the connections between the lesser troops and the bigger ones, you're going to be able to make some pretty significant dents in their forces, that's for sure.
They could then be slaughtered with ease. Van Roth saw the opportunity for such a piece of Xenos tech to unlock the key to turn the tide of not just Octarius, but all future warfare for the Imperium against Tyranids, and potentially
even if it is technically heresy,
a real ability to deal with these Xenos horrors. This procurement was only possible though thanks to the Death Watch, with whom Van Roth was acquainted. In order for this Xenos tech to be of any use at all though, they would have to be able to both reproduce its abilities and then also replicate it as a device, perhaps with some adaptation for use as a weapon. The only means for them to test this would be to try it out with live subjects. And so
oh no. Oh no.
World now contaminated by Xenos. In cooperation with a Xenos savant explorer, Barcelia Mung, Van Roth would test out the crown upon subjects both human and orc in collaboration with the Death Watch and various other Imperial forces, both regular Militarum and biologist techs. Despite all their best efforts, much like other orc technology, it only appeared functional when they mounted upon orc mechs. To make matters worse, they received notice that both orc ships and space hulks were barreling toward the planet.
Oh shit. Okay. First step, too, is also it makes sense that the weird orc tech crown thing would probably only work with orc tech and orcs in general. That tends to be how they is. Their guns don't even work unless they're holding them, because literally not engineered like anything that makes any sense at all, because that's how orcs are. But also space hulks coming towards the planet. That is bad. Space hulks are another really cool element in 40k. Like, basically think giant space derelicts that have been smashed together from slipping in and out of the warp, and then when they come out, you just get these giant amalgams of these massive ships that have just become these giant messes. And like, some of them are infested with Tyranids. Sometimes they get found by other aliens, and sometimes they get collected. I think I remember reading about a thing of one planet that had a space hulk end up on it, and they basically got hella rich off of what they could salvage from it. Because sometimes space hulks have pretty valuable stuff from the past, like Golden Age technology, which reminds me of that one story about the time when Mechanicus found a Golden Age AI, and the thing basically called them fucking morons. That was a funny story. The world may be grimdark, but the stories in it do not have to be.
They presumed attracted somehow by this orc crown, but it was anyone's guess as to why. Van Roth would collaborate with a lost Inquisitor, Muir, who had long been abandoned on this planet when she was caught attempting to steal a transport and flee the world. Upon the explanation of his grand quest, Muir laughed maniacally that he and Sah's son were all as foolish as one another.
Oh no. What did she see?
She also revealed that Van Roth, who had planned to destroy the remains of an Eldar ship in order to cover their escape, their plan would be unworkable unless he allied with stranded Eldari she knew on the world. This they would do as fighting between orcs on the world and Tyranids continued unabated, and enabled them to carry out various plans so that they might all extricate themselves. Their attempts would be ultimately futile though, and after having encountered Tyranids within the Eldar structures, managed to escape outside with only minimal survivors, they discovered to their horror that the Death Watch escorting the crown were as doomed as they themselves.
Oh shit, that's not good.
Completely deluged by orcs, seemingly attracted to the world by the strange Xenos crown in saturation levels. The Imperial mission was completely doomed, and Van Roth's last sights would be that of Imperial cruisers burning up upon entering the atmosphere of Veloria.
Oh shit. That is horrifying. That is... Talk about the architect of your own fucking downfall. Jesus Christ, that's something else is what that is. That is shit. That is like fucking yourself over in a very unique way. Just bring on this deluge of orcs because of this crown you were trying to use to hopefully fight back against Tyranids, and it didn't work. Yeah, no, should have seen that one coming, actually, let's be totally honest.
Had long been my assumption that the Octarius War would be focused somehow on a far grander orc perspective, with the Imperium providing background for far smaller operations. It's hard to tell anything from the Tyranid perspective, because as we know, all they are driven instinct.
Yeah, Tyranid stories are, from what I know, pretty hard to write and tell, because it's like, how do you write a story from the perspective of a hive mind? You kinda can't. The Tyranids don't really have a consciousness in the way we would define it. They're a pure hive mind who work by instinct and pure drive of propagating and gaining biomass and stuff like that. They don't exactly think. I mean, okay, the higher ones do, but they're just the cores of the hive mind. Also, that art is legit baller and fucking horrifying. Just these wispy tendrils of Tyranids reaching to the galaxy like a grasping hand ready to snuff out its light. Good fucking shit.
Although, wouldn't it be interesting to try and write something from the Tyranid perspective?
Nah.
Perhaps along the same lines as Lelian Paul's The Bees, well worth a read, by the way. Or if not that, then as I had expected, something more from the Orc Lads Crumpim perspective. I mean, it shouldn't shock me, I suppose, because 40k
Orcs Crumpim gets
from the Imperial perspective always, and so therefore is this. It was also Inquisitor Cryptman's grand plan from the outset, and this is merely the continuation of it.
Of course.
Even then, I had thought we would see perhaps a few focused chapters of Astartes, some Imperial Guard perhaps spearheaded by the Death Corps of Krieg, not commitments uncommon for Imperial sector-based operations.
The Death Corps of Krieg, one of my favorite, like I mentioned in the Factions Explained video, one of my favorite factions. I'll probably watch a more in-depth lore video about them just to discuss them, because I do like them. I really think they're cool. And to kind of make a correction, I did bring it up in the comments. Someone mentioned it in the comments with my whole thing about, like, the German-looking thing. Deathcore Creek actually gone from a more defined, clearly World War One German-inspired look, but over time they've had their aesthetic kind of shifted. So now they're kind of a blend of mostly World War One French in terms of aesthetics, but with some leftovers from the Germany-inspired stuff. They're kind of a general World War One Eastern Front aesthetic, mostly French with inspiration from Germany and I think and some British right there. So, correction to a point from another video. So, it was kind of a weird half right. We're both kind of correct, but things shifted over time. Statements from those comments. I just wanted to actually bring it up, but, But, yeah, there's still part 2 of this video, too, so that'll be a lot to talk about there.
Clearly things are not being handled on the small scale here. It's a containment of the entirety of the Octarius Orc Empire and beyond.
That is a baller's model setup.
We have listings of many thousands of Imperial Guard regiments, 3 attending core Astartes chapters of Dark Krakens, a Salamander successor, Atlantean Spears, Blood Angel successors, and the Obsidian Jaguars, an Ultramarine successor, as well as potentially 20 others in smaller Strike Force operations, including members of the Dark Angels, Ultramarines, White Scars, and Red Scorpions.
Ooh.
And then you still have Inquisition, Sororitas, Mechanicus, Knight Houses bringing anything over 1,000 knights total. Then the Mechanicus also have deployed at least 4 Titan Legio, and then still we have the Imperial Navy assets. It is quite clear then that Octarius, in terms of what it's dragging into the maw of its war, is turning out to be quite all-encompassing for the Imperium, which raises the question,
damn.
If we consider just how heavy this whole operation is becoming, are we getting enough gritty detail about the campaign and those who are orchestrating it? And to answer that, I need to briefly step out of the lore itself. Because for anyone who has read a significant amount of 40k supplementary material, you tend to get a feel, albeit subjectively, for what can be handled lightweight and what deserves to be handled more heavily. Octarius, for my cup of tea, deserves to be handled more heavily. I want to see it have more of a weighty background. The degree of storytelling you get from the Imperial Armor series, the Heresy Forge World books, or quite honestly even the more recent Vigilus stuff. Octarius deserves to be fleshed out to fulfill that weight of material, and granted there are more books in the series to come, and it's certainly not as thin as the Psychic Awakening series, which deserved to be heavier than it was, considering the importance in some of its subject matter. Now, I've talked about supplements before. The Titanicus, Necromunda books are worth getting just for themselves, even if you weren't playing the game, because if you're a 40k fan, they contain rich sources of material, interesting lore, but supplement books are not novels. They're essentially mission packs or rule expansions, and therefore most often only have a thin section with which they expand upon a narrative. Then it's data, missions, force traits, strats, etc. But whereas novels are character-driven, supplement material tend to cut the waffle and get down to the core sequence of events and actions. This is standard for campaign and supplement material, and importantly they often cover events which do not appear in novels, or they enable the framing of lore concepts that do not appear elsewhere. But this can often lead to confusion, and it's why when people ask me, where can I read about such and such, I have to say, well, you can't. That's out of print, and no.
Oh, no. Oh, geez, that is actually the worst. Things being out of print. Oof. That's a bad time.
Digital version is available. This is why I own most supplementary series, and this is why my Gathering Storm set, which only appeared recently again for people digitally, I doubt it's going to be reprinted, and so it remains safely on my bookshelves. So,
see, before we let Luetin continue, I just want to stress, this is why I like to buy physical books. Like, yeah, I'll buy books digitally, but the reason I have such a big, growing physical collection, mostly right now, just, like I said, Japanese light novels, is just because I like physical media. Because a thing can fall out of print, and you can no longer have it, and trying to find sources about it for people interested in might be difficult, because it's out of print, and there's no new copies, and who knows if you're going to be able to find them used, and maybe they won't even sell it digitally anymore. So having these physical stuff on hand is usually a pretty good bypass in case you want to get into it or talk about it and bring it up. Preservation of media is important, people, and it sucks that we live in a day and age where it just seems to be slipping away further and further because stupid fucking corporations have no concept of trying to preserve the media that they themselves create. And it sucks a lot because you lose a lot of good stuff if places like that, the places that produce them, don't try to keep it around, or in some cases, in the worst scenario, try to forget it fucking exists entirely. Which, I don't know if it happens often, but I probably am well on the money that it does occasionally. Like, I mean, How many people would like it if a remake just totally overrode the original version of something that existed beforehand? I mean, I'm a person who lives by the fact that the remake does not invalidate the existence of the former version, but, then again, I've also been a guy who remakes fanfictions anyway, so whatever do I have to say about something being remade? I mean, remakes are fun, but it's the preservation of the media. Even if it's in some form or another, keeping something around is, you lose something from your own universe if you just let it slip away like that. Just saying.
Octarius, then. Is it weighty enough? For me, no. But if you stack it up objectively against other supplements across the past 3 years, it does just about enough. Better. Also, supplements are not always consistent in their length across a series, so I'm hopeful that additional books will contain heftier explorations of Octarius, and this is really more of an opening overview to set the scene. Returning to the Inquisitors on Octarius itself, it's clear that things are far from being in an ideal situation. Multiple Inquisitors thought that San was doomed from the start, and things so far are definitely leaning in that direction. Where though are the Krieg? Where are the vast Tyranid and Orc waves smashing against one another with lengthy descriptions?
Yeah, where's that stuff?
War bosses ready to bash in some heads. These are the things we need, so I'm hopeful we will see them as the series unfolds. Additionally, my original considerations were that perhaps nearby Imperial forces would be drawn into the conflict. Kadashan, for example. So far, there's little to speak of in that regard. We seem only to be having the very initial overviews of the situation. The Inquisition placing their pieces on the board, as it were. And already there have been multiple fatalities. Inquisitor Van Roth's mission was truly laudable, if not obviously a fool's errand. The very idea of an Imperium member being able to devise the functionality of an Orc device just shows how little the humans of the Imperium understand of the galaxy and how much hubris they themselves carry.
Yep.
The annihilation of this operation, though, leaves questions unanswered, like what is the fate of the Tyranid synapse disrupting crown? The prospect that if the Orcs retained control of this, they may well be able to use it to gain the upper hand on the Tyranids, which, while in one respect may be positive for the Imperium, as we well know, the prospect of either Xenos emerging from Octarius victorious was not at all the plan.
Yeah,
Even
no.
more interesting, though, is that dotted through the Octarius material, there are skimmed brief references of a communication with Inquisitor Kryptman himself, seemingly Kryptman still has agents at work within the Imperium and in relation to Octarius, which raises some very interesting possibilities for the future. Will Inquisitor Sahansan be able to hold back the tsunami of Xenos, and can the Cordon Impenetra become as its name suggests? What of Kryptman? What of Krieg? And what of the Xenos themselves? The final fate of the Octarius sector is far from certain, and the lives of many billions of Imperial citizens and massive quantities of assets still hang in a precarious balance.
That is, definitely... Okay, let me check out this end part. Okay, this is just an outro. Okay, this is just the outro where he talks about ads. So, okay, time for, good old post-video discussion. So, okay. So, that is actually a really interesting topic, then, to get into. Obviously, that wasn't a whole lot. That was, like, just the beginnings of it. This is part one of, like, a part two thing, and so far he, I doubt he's covered all of it. Like, the entire thing. Part two probably goes over enough, because it's, like, twice the length of this video, and, so that is gonna be a fucking watch. I might have to divide that one up into two parts itself. But, That paints a really interesting picture. See, I like these kind of stories, too, these elements of 40k, of how sometimes the worst part of it isn't even the things that the Imperium is fighting, but kind of the Imperium itself, to be totally honest. Like, I mean, what he mentioned with how there's the sub-factions of the Inquisition that are debating and fighting with each other in terms of their tactics and what to use, calling each other Kryptman mad. That's kind of funny. Really, you're so crazy and batshit that other Inquisitors start using you as a baseline for when you're going too far. That is a reputation to have, that is for sure. But it is kind of funny that Kryptman is even in some ways still regarded as like a hero of the Imperium, a savior, a guy who, actually did good, despite the fact that the Inquisition was like, get the fuck out of here, you're making things worse. But, yeah, so that was part one of the Octarius War. That is a very interesting video, and definitely paints a situation that, I mean, freaking, like I said, I like it being a logistics-heavy thing. I mean, at least in concept, like Luetin said in the video, apparently the books aren't as heavy as they should be for such a topic, but, you know, it's crazy, though, that it's like they're trying to close off this sector because, oh fucking shit, the orcs and the frickin' Tyranids are fighting each other, and that is bad for everybody else that is not them. And if one side wins, I mean, it could be positive, but it's also probably not something we want to let happen. So I'm interested if there's going to be anything more about that crown and what came about from that in the next video, and just kind of where it goes from there, or if it gets any worse. I mean, the Drukhari are involved, for fuck's sake. I mean, of course they are, because they're raiders. This is kind of their shtick. It's what they do. I just want to know if it goes from bad to worse, because, I mean, it's 40k. It usually does go from bad to worse. So, that is... Oof, that's crazy good stuff. So, yeah. Till next time, and who knows, maybe before I post this video up, I'll be playing frickin' Darktide, because, you know, frickin' dating stuff is impossible to do sometimes. I was like, oh, you know, I have Darktide downloaded. I might play that before the video goes up. But whenever I decide to post this, I don't know. I might post it, and I start uploading it as soon as I go to bed. I don't know. Probably not. So, till next time.